Okay, so I will get started. Hi everyone, good morning and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sharon, I'm part of the team here at Kinore, and I'm really excited to be hosting this session with Rick on scaling without chaos, building a 12 to 36 month roadmap. So just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Um, this is a 30-minute live session, so just to keep things moving, we will have Q&A at the end. So if anything comes up while Rick is talking, drop your questions in and we'll come back to them towards the end. And don't be shy to drop in any questions. There are no bad questions. I know we're all in here to learn. So if anything does come up, drop it in the Q&A or the chat. Also to flag, the information in here is for general informational purposes only. So for specific advice relating to your business, we'd always recommend speaking directly with a expert. So Rick is available. If you guys are looking to speak with him, you can reach us at hello@kinore.com or through our phone number or through our live chat at kinore.com. So I've also launched a poll at the start of the webinar just so we can get an understanding on where you guys are at with your tech planning and your roadmaps. So thanks for those who have answered. It'll be really interesting to see those results as we go along. So let me get into introducing Rick as well. So Rick is our head of digital transformation and he's our CTO here at Kinore as well. His background is in software architecture and integrations. He spent, let's say, the majority of his career working with businesses across pretty much every industry you can think of. So Rick leads our technology side as well here at Kinore, and he also works with scaling SMEs on exactly the kind of challenge we're covering today, which is building your roadmap. So Rick, really delighted to have you, and I'll stop sharing my screen now so you can get into your slides.
Now let me get into there. Share. We'll go there. I'll advance this. Okay. So, first of all, I should say this is we do a series of webinars, Sharon and I do.
Mhm.
And this one's my favorite because it is in this 30 minutes, I'm going to give everybody a something they can implement tomorrow if they want. I'll go through a methodology that I've used for dozens and dozens of clients. Um, and I'm actually going to use the Knorr's roadmap as an example of, how we built our roadmap. We practice what we preach here at Knorr. So I'm literally going to show you, we're going to lift up the bonnet and I'll show you all, how we put together our roadmap. Again, this is something that, I've done dozens of times with clients. So, you can leave this conversation with something, like I said, that you can put in place tomorrow. Well, that's the goal of this. But before we get into all that, though, we titled this webinar "Why Tech Scaling." Well, let's talk about why it causes chaos, right? So businesses don't suffer from a lack of technology. The inverse is actually true. A lot of businesses will go out and they will purchase, technology solutions. Things tend to snowball, and then, 3 to 5 years down the line, you've got either technology that you didn't know that you were paying for, or something that's so niche that it doesn't really make sense in the overall context of the business. Um, but businesses, again, they don't suffer from a lack of technology. The real problem is with orchestration, and it's with governance of the technology. And that's really what a roadmap helps you define, right? With those two things in mind, you're able to then look for cost saving measures, or improve your margin, or kind of steer what you steer your application landscape to make sure that it's delivering the best value, not only for yourself, but sometimes for your clients and your customers too, um, so what are some common symptoms you'll see for what I'm describing? If your business has too many tools or too many applications, you might need to, put together, something like a roadmap, because that indicates to me that um, you're not being strategic about your overall application landscape. If you've got like key like one person dependencies in place or unclear decision making, or even if like you have initiatives in your business that seem to start but never finish, this is where again like a technology roadmap will help, um, and it'll help align your business goals, which are over here, to your current state and where you are and your current state pain points. You need to build a bridge between the two so that you can get to your business goals, right? Does that make sense, Sharon?
Oh, no, that makes total sense. I've also put into the chat your methodology on, you have it on LinkedIn, you have an article basically on Kinore's roadmap.
I
So
do.
I just popped that into the chat so people can have a read through it after the webinar. And I'll make sure it's in the recording email for the people who are watching the webinar today as well. But yeah,
Cool,
that's
cool.
great.
So I like to, again, I've mentioned this, but I come from a consulting background, and my background's in software architecture. So
Mhm.
I would have been brought in and worked with clients to put together. So where I would have been brought in would have been like key strategic decisions, like, right? So like either, do we need this system versus this system long term, or which project really has the best bang for the buck in terms of return on investment. Um, but what I always advise clients to do is to the sweet spot, I call it like the Goldilocks range, is to build a roadmap between 12 and 36 months. And the reason that's the sweet spot is that's long enough in the future to where you can have strategic outcomes and real, and measured return on investment. But it's also short enough to where you can still stay grounded and realistic and um, in what you want to do. If you start to go past, into like 5 to 10 years, although those are good, you may as well be rubbing a crystal ball because like
Mhm.
that's so I tell people to, try to keep it targeted from, 1 to 3 years, I think is again the real sweet spot here. So,
Mhm.
the only other thing to mention, I think, in terms of like the roadmap is, and Kinore definitely preaches this, is, you want your roadmap to be a living document. It's not something you're going to put together and, put it in a drawer, print it out and put it in a drawer. Like it's a breathing document. So, I'll give you an example. We had a couple of acquisitions last year at Kinore, closed a little bit earlier than than I thought they would, which required a revision of the roadmap. I feel like I'm revising it at least a couple of times a year for large initiatives, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think right now Kenora is on its fifth or sixth revision of our overall tech roadmap that was put initially put together when I started a couple of years ago. But that's my point. It's totally
Mhm.
natural for it to ebb and flow with the direction of the company. Particular pain points may
Mhm.
um, override. Business needs might override and cause you to reprioritize some of your initiatives. But
Yeah,
let's get
that's a
into
good point. So just a question there, Rick.
yeah, yeah.
So how often do you think people should be reviewing their roadmap in the year? Would it be like a certain time frame, or do you think when, let's say, business goals change, or when do you think is a good time to review your roadmap?
I think the board level should be looking at the roadmap. If you have a board, if you don't have a board, certainly like senior leadership should be looking at it at
Mhm.
least once a quarter, at least once a quarter, just to make sure. Now, what I'd say is if you're someone in my position, monthly, just to see if things are, well, obviously you need to measure where, return on investment continuously and make sure that certain projects and initiatives are on track. But
Mhm.
from a steering perspective for a business, that should be your key and one of your key indicators that the business is all moving in the right direction. It should be your technology roadmap, or certainly a piece of it. Um, but what I'm sharing on my screen here is, let me just go back to here. So so this is the start of building a roadmap. You essentially want to measure or get a list of all your current projects, right? Because everyone has projects that are in flight. You may have a list of them. It might not be something as fancy as this. You might be using Asana or Jira to manage your work. It might just be like a Microsoft project or a Microsoft Planner where you have all your work. Um, I'll call that work a backlog, right? So it's just an unprioritized list of things you know you need to do. It can even be an Excel worksheet. If you wanted to start today and you don't have any of this in place, start a blank Excel workbook. Start listing all the things that you need to do. Don't worry about the priority. Don't worry about the return on investment. I would just literally get together a list, right? Um, from there, from there, what we need to do is go through and analyze each initiative, right? So this is getting into the methodology of the framework. So you've collected all of your data. You've developed basically an unprioritized list.
Mhm.
This slide I actually took from when I was building the Kinore's technology roadmap. This is a slide that I put together to explain the methodology to my peers. So again, like I was telling them, look, I'm going to go through, I'm going to collect all the business pain points. I think at the time I arrived at like 23 initiatives that I knew that we needed to do. Um, and then I went away for a couple weeks and prioritized those using a weighted scoring model. And I'll definitely talk about that because I think that's the real key to success to all this that nobody really thinks through. And then you share that with you put together a readout or share that with peers or again board level if you have it level feedback. My overall point with this showing this slide is that a roadmap project doesn't need to take 6 months with some big four consultant to come in. It can be as quick as six weeks really. And it doesn't have to be like over. It can be contextualized to your business, so you don't necessarily need anything longer than that. I think for an initial roadmap, I think people get bogged down, and it's almost like a paralysis that I've seen with clients. They know what they need to do. They roughly know what order they need to do it in. And the reason I mentioned the weighted scoring model is because I think that's the key hurdle they need to get over is like, okay, how do I prioritize all this work? And I think that's the next piece I want to go through here. So you've got your list of initiatives, right? So let's just say they're all unprioritized. And just to keep it simple, let's just say, Sharon, they're in an Excel workbook, literally just a column of initiatives, right? What you need to do is to take your business goals, and wow, this is a throwback. So those are that square in the middle, that's accountant online. So that was Knorr's trading name before we became Kinore. But those were our goals. And what you want to do is come up with metrics that are important to your business. So what I would say is you can start with the ones that I have here. So alignment to strategic goals, time criticality, risk, and investment. Okay, so maybe just start with those just to keep it simple, and then tweak later if you think you need to put other metrics in there. But what I did is for each of those rows, again, I'm going to stick with the Excel worksheet, is you want to understand how closely do each of these projects align to our company goals, right? How many of those goals basically are we advancing with this project? And what, does it need to be completed this year? And is there risks in not completing it this year? And what's the investment? So for investment, you can just use a banded or a tiered system where, you could say like if it's under 5,000 euro, that gets, a certain amount of points. And if it's less than 10,000 euro, it gets a certain amount of points, right, to help you develop
Mhm.
a weighted scoring system. And then what you do is you need to figure out like what's important to your business at this time in terms of weighting the scoring model. So what made sense for Kinore at the time was we wanted to heavily advance our strategic goals. So you'll see 50% of the weight for each of these projects or initiatives was, hey, did it move us forward um, toward our goals? We also obviously had to pay attention to, time criticality, risk, and investment. But again, that was the mix that made sense for us. Now, a cash-strapped business, may want to obviously need to increase the investment relative to again the what's going on with your business's revenue and stuff like that. Maybe the strategic goals aren't as important, and you're trying to again de-risk and also watch, spend. So your risk and investment would be higher than Knorr's in this example, right? Um, but once you have this scoring model done in the Excel worksheet, um, you want to get to a place where you have a valuation score, an integer value between basically 1 and 100, right? Once you have that, that's the key. So that stops all of the that stops all of the departments fighting over each other. That stops whoever can scream the loudest, right? Because you've literally and objectively um, went through and scored each of these goals against what's important to your business. And if you can articulate that for each project. So for example, what we see on the right, that's a scored project. And it also has, indicators showing what makes up that score. So that if you take this to, a board conversation, it becomes very easy to weigh that with the other work that you have in flight, right? But
Mhm.
I'll pause there. Does that make sense or
Yeah. No, that's great. So would you also say the scoring model is a way to remove subjectivity from what gets done first? So, for
100%?
example, yeah, like Christina as this head of marketing or sales might want, I don't know, our CRM to be updated or connected or something like that, and head of accounting, Tom, might want something else. So this scoring model would really help to remove that subjectivity. Um, so how straightforward is it for someone to build their own scoring model? What do they base it on?
Start with what I have on the screen. Start with what I have on the screen because I make it simple, and then what I'd say is just tweak it. You need to tweak it based on business needs. Now, look, that's a good outreach. If you want to connect with me on hello@Kinore.com, that's something I can help put my 2 cents in, just advise
Hmm.
on. But I'd start with what I have here just for simplicity and maybe tweak the weights based on the state of your business. It's kind of hard. It's hard to give. I have to give general advice here, so it's
Hmm.
kind of case by case though.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So once you have everything scored, this is also one of the cool things you can do. Because once you have the score, the next step is to determine the effort for each project or initiative, right? So effort just means like duration, right? To me anyway, in this example. Like how long is that project or initiative going to take, right? So if you have the score, which is the value in this slide, and you have the effort, you can then like quickly just see what projects you should pay attention to, right? What projects are your quick wins? So a high value project that doesn't have a lot of effort, those are your quick wins, sorry. Whereas, a high value, high effort, those are your strategic goals or your strategic projects. I'd say if you put this together and you can plot, by the way, this slide was done in PowerPoint. You can plot this by like having grid, showing the grid lines and then just like literally having a plotting system so that these circles are in the actual place, and then you can kind of
Mhm.
like move them into buckets manually a little bit. But I would definitely advise you to plot this on this effort versus value matrix, because then you can see like, oh wait, Project 18, and I don't know what 18 was, but Project 18 is a time sink. And then you can say like, but because, and it's a time sink because we know that because it has relative low value, but it's going to take a lot of effort. And then the other ones that are, low value, low effort, I call those filler projects. So, what I'd say is after you put this together, this should become your priority. So do whatever you have in flight, right? Um, and then tackle your quick wins. That's where you're going to start to see rapid improvement in your business is just by taking those, relatively low effort but high value projects, executing those in quick succession, and you can really transform a business just quickly by tackling those low hanging fruit. Um,
Okay. That's great. So the quick wins is in a quadrant. I guess it's about finding the bang for your buck without draining your team, like you said earlier. So even looking back at the poll results, a good number of you guys said that you're figuring it out as you go and you don't have a roadmap yet. So I think this matrix is probably the best place to start. And it gives you some sort of momentum without having to build a full roadmap from day one. And it also allows you to small goals.
yep, yep. Now listen, I've when you present this to your peers, so if you're in my position and you present this to your peers, you might have a little bit of drama, right? Because like share let's say for example, your head of marketing is very passionate about Project 18, but you know that it's a time sink. Like you've done you've objectively evaluated it. You know that it's high effort. Um, this is where the exercise I think um, helps you articulate again what you're doing and why and what order. Because if you can have slides like this as well as like the methodology behind it, no one I'll say this at Kinore, my peers and the company itself, like there's always competing priorities. Every day there's a competing priority, right? But what I'll say is I've never been in a situation where I've had to, you know, I'd say that everybody understands because of the roadmap, and that's what I'm trying to say is like I've never had a loud voice saying like, "Well, do my project next." That just doesn't happen at Kenora because again, we've all they all understand this methodology. They all signed off on it. And more importantly, I've got their blessing for lack of a better word there.
Mhm.
But let me keep going. I'm sorry. I'm just I love these
Yeah.
webinars, but it's sometimes really tough get through them all really within 30 minutes. But anyway, so this is just some more things you can do. Again, I did this in PowerPoint. One trick with PowerPoint you can do is with Gantt charts is just make a table. And then what I do is I use again just rectangles and make manually plot them that way. But anyway, this is just a Gantt chart of a list of all of our projects, the order that we're going to execute them in. So you can't tell by the colors here, but basically what I did is the light blue, um, those are those quick wins that we executed way back when we started this roadmap. I'd say today I'd use something like Claude or Grok or something to just auto generate a slide like this. But yeah. And the only other thing to kind of call out here just quickly is you want a slide for, or you need a repository for each project or initiative that kind of has. So in America, again, the consulting lingo, we would have called this a baseball card slide. And it's because a
Hmm.
baseball card has like maybe a picture and some key stats. But this is just you want a slide for each project that again or initiative that articulates like the pain points, the goals you're trying to solve, duration, investment, stuff like that, as well as its weighted score, because that helps you if you can have a deck of these. And it doesn't literally have to be a PowerPoint deck and slides and all that stuff. It could be a ticket in Asana or Jira or something like that, or just um, a Trello board card or a Microsoft Planner card. You get the idea there, but you can start to make sure that these are reprioritized and look through. Like I said, I would look through our roadmap monthly, but at the board or senior leadership level, I would look through this stuff quarterly to make sure it's in the right order. Um, I think we have a couple minutes for questions.
Yes. So I'm just checking the Q&A now, and I don't see any questions in there. So if anyone would like to drop any questions in the chat, that would be great. So while we're waiting for that, I guess I'll just introduce the next webinar. So we have a webinar on limiting manual processes with smart integrations. And in this session, Rick will show how smart integrations can replace manual processes with connected, automated workflows. So this webinar is next month on the 11th, and it's at the same time as well. So I will drop the link to register in the chat as well. And it will also be in the recording email for those who are watching the recording. I know a lot of people probably won't join because I know that's when you guys are going on your summer holidays, but it's still great to have the webinar to hand and you can watch it really whenever it suits you. So, yeah.
That one's a good one too, though. I would,
Yeah, no, really good webinar. We ran it last year or earlier this year as well, and we also have the recording up on YouTube if you guys would like to watch the recording. But yeah, it would be nice to get a refresher of that as well. Okay, so I don't see any more questions, and we have a few people who have left already. So that's great. Thank you so much, Rick, for your time. And I hope you guys really found this webinar practical. And we hope we can see you on the next one next month. Thanks,
bye,
Rick. Thanks,
Sharon. Bye,
everyone.
everybody. Bye, Sharon. It was
Bye.
a pleasure. Talk to you later.
Bye.